My name is Michael PA, and today we're going to be talking about DiGiGrid, and more specifically the native solution, which is the iOS, the iOX, and the IOC over here on the right hand side. Before I go on though, I want to explain exactly who DiGiGrid is, how we came about, how it was formed, how it was created, and who's involved. There are two companies involved in DiGiGrid. One of them is DiGiCo, one of the world's leaders in large format consoles. And obviously they do house of worship, they do large tours, they do large facilities. Their consoles are everywhere, from the SD7, their flagship, all the way down to this little baby right here, the SD11. And the other company obviously is Waves, who are the leaders in the industry for plug-in technology. First plug-in on the block for HD, which was the Q10 back in 1992-ish. 92? Yeah, 92. So, and we have over 140 plugins. Now, if you put the two companies together, you end up with this fuse that gives you the best hardware and the best sound processing all into one big package. So it's very exciting. Why specifically DiGiCo? Well, basically because they're really good at what they do. But we need to talk about why Waves and SoundGrid first as well. A few years ago, we developed at Waves a technology called SoundGrid. Now, SoundGrid was developed for live sound, and we developed this technology that does high sample rate audio very, very fast through Ethernet, because everybody has Ethernet. And it's all off-the-shelf hardware. So basically what you end up with is you end up with a server, which we call the SG server, which, for want of a better explanation, is basically a PC with an operating system on it that you just turn on and turn off that processes DSP of plugins. Ethernet cable from that to a network switch. And then with Live, we've always gone out to what's called an I/O card for the specific console, which you need to get for either the Yamaha, the Midas, the Soundcraft, or in DiGiCo's case, and a lot of other consoles' case, they already have it built in. And then the computer up the top, all that's doing is basically giving you the GUI and the control for the plugins. So it's not doing any processing at all. All it's doing is basically letting you twiddle knobs. I love saying that, twiddle knobs. So, very low latency, proprietary, not proprietary hardware, so you can replace it at Home Depot, Staples, anywhere like that if it breaks, which was great on tour, and also it's really simple connectivity. It's an Ethernet cable, and the reality is Firewires come and gone. USB went to USB 2, went to USB 3. Who knows where it's going to go next? Thunderbolt may come or may go, but Ethernet's always been here and is pretty much going to stay around forever. And pretty much all laptops either have an adapter for Ethernet or already still have an Ethernet port. So the fact that we've managed to do this with Ethernet, because you all have Ethernet cables, right, is pretty cool. So we're excited about it. Now, DiGiCo and Waves SoundGrid together, we are in some of the largest tours and the largest facilities in live in the world. You know, when you've got Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, and the likes all relying on our hardware and our software, we know it works, right? So we were thinking, okay, there's no reason at all why we can't bring this technology into the recording studio. So that's exactly what we've done. The last one is this one. We were at the Olympics in London last year. So we had 6 SD7 consoles, all running Waves SoundGrid and Mercury bundles, all doing the front of house for the Olympics. It didn't help the UK win any medals, but it did sound really good. This is the lineup. From the left to the right, we've got these babies, which we're talking about in a second, which is the iOS, the iOX, and the IOC. That's for native DAWs. In the middle, you've got the MGO and the MGB. Now this enables you to take high quality audio, 128 channels of audio through an Ethernet cable from any MADI-enabled console. Can you pass that around? So Ethernet into a laptop, any DAW, press record after it's routed into the console, and you're good to go. So, and on the right-hand side, we've got these babies over here, which are the DLS and DLI. Those enable you to have networked studios for Pro Tools HD and HDX. So you can have up to 8 studios which are either HD or native on a network, all sharing I/O. It also gives you plug-in DSP processing of up to 300 plugins. It's all under 0.8 milliseconds. It's all with an Ethernet connection. If you add a DLI, you can move your entire I/O rack up to 700 meters outside the control room and still keep under 0.8 milliseconds. But the ones we're talking about today are these ones. This is the iOS. The iOS is 8 in, 8 out. It comes with independent headphone inputs on the front. The preamps are straight out of an SD7 console, so they're high-class preamps. It's an Ethernet connection straight to your laptop or your desktop computer, and you install the driver, and then you're pretty much good to go, and it'll give you plug-in processing of up to 250 to 300 plugins, and again, all under 0.8 milliseconds, which is very, very cool, especially when all you need to do is plug in an Ethernet cable. So, now, one of the questions that always comes up is, how do we actually make this work with your DAW, any DAW, and manage to help you guys keep your workflow? Well, we've worked really hard at that. Let me just switch screens here for a second. On my right and your left, you will see a non-PowerPoint, so we're not doing Death by PowerPoint anymore. When you install the software, the SoundGrid driver, it installs with what's called the SoundGrid Studio. Now, when you launch it, it gives you this screen. So on the left-hand side, you've got the I/O Bank A. That is any of your I/Os. So it's the iOS, it might be an iOX, an IOC, or any other I/Os that you have there. And you can have up to 8 I/Os all banked there in your Bank A. I/O Bank B says Pro Tools. That's this laptop. You can have 8 different laptops or desktop machines all on the network, and you can literally share I/O amongst any of them. So you can say, okay, I want to send 1 and 2 to that room over there right now because they're recording something else. I want to access that I/O from over there from machine 7 or machine 8 if you go really extreme. And it's all through an Ethernet network, and it's all under 0.8 milliseconds. So that's 16 devices on a network all sharing I/O, which is very, very cool for under 0. That's 40 samples, by the way. Now, there's also a little thing here called the patch bay. Now, the patch bay basically gives you an input of what's connected. So, and it's an auto patch bay, which means the more devices you actually have on your network, they auto patch here, and then you can send them wherever you want to go just by moving the ticks, which again is really easy to use. You don't necessarily even need to touch this if you want it really simple. You can just go, okay, right, set it up, forget it, leave it there. Now, let's go into Pro Tools. As far as workflow goes, right now I'm using Pro Tools, but it could be any core audio driver or ASIO compatible digital audio workstation. So it could be Reaper, Cubase, Ableton Live, Uendo, pretty much anything. So you guys all have your workflow and you like working the way you work. So if we came along and said, yes, this will work, but we want you to do 5 extra things, that's not going to work. It's just going to annoy you. So we actually have it coming in here as a plugin. So if I click on this little plugin here called Studio Rack, this is what we call the Studio Rack application. It's a plugin, but it's a plugin on steroids because it's the only plugin that actually lets you have 8 plugins in one plugin. So you can now save a chain of plugins with all of their settings and the automation and everything else, and it saves with your session. So every single one of these boxes gives you the opportunity to save another plugin, and they all have their independent settings, but it all saves in one plugin, and therefore it still refers back to the delay compensation engine reporting for your DAW, and it still automates the same as a normal plugin, and everything is saved with the session. Now, up here, there's a little green light that says WSG, which means Wave SoundGrid. What that means is right now it's saying, hey, it's connected to an iOS, so all the DSP is happening on here. If you decide that you want to take that session on the road, you can still open the session. That little light won't light up though, because it'll go, okay, right, now we're using your processing on your computer, and all the plugins will open the same, and then when you go back onto your main system, it'll open up with a little light again because it goes, okay, DSP processing. If you send this session to someone else, it's still going to work. Just get them to download the Studio Rack application off our website, which by the way is free. And they can open it up, and then they can have exactly the same session look and work and feel and work with the session. So it's very, very cool. Now, if you want to record, one of the things with recording is people want to be able to record with all of their plugins in. And when you're talking natively, that's always been a bit of a scary area because of latency. We've actually got you back there too. You can record still under a millisecond of latency with all of your plugins activated and have no slap back whatsoever. If you click on Monitor Sends, this window comes up here. So you activate your Monitor Sends, you then go from playback. If I click PB over here, and I go into record, you see it mutes the return. But you've already got the SoundGrid software working in the background, so you can still hear it in the studio, and everybody in the recording room have their headphones on and they can hear everything that you want them to hear, with all of the reverbs, compressors, EQs, and are getting no slapback. And then as soon as you go back into playback mode, everything goes back to normal, but so you don't really notice what's going on. It just happens for you, which is very, very cool. It's like voodoo. It's cool. I love stuff like that. Then you've got these 4 knobs over here, which are called quick keys. Because you've got all these different spaces for plugins, we get out of monitor sends, let's click on Kramer. So say, for example, if I wanted to get to the output of Kramer's HLS, I can right-click it, I can right-click it, I can right-click it. There you go. Okay, so I can right-click it, I go quick keys. Let's assign this to quick key 2. So now quick key 2 is always going to be the output gain for that plugin. So if I decide to go to C4, come on, there you go. That output gain is still the output gain for the Kramer plugin. So it's like my go-to knob for that one tweak that I want in that plugin. And then if I decide that I want to get rid of it, that's fine. All I need to do is disconnect the quick key and I can move it to another plugin. These are all MIDI capable as well, so if you've got like a little MIDI controller, you can assign them to faders or whatever else you want to assign them to. So it gives you an awful lot of flexibility. If you don't necessarily have a right click, then that's fine. Just do it through the assign key right here, and you can do it with left click. So now, if I want to add a plugin, again, all I do is just add plugin. It gives me the list. Let's go EQ. Let's go Red 17. And there it comes up. So all these plugins come up in exactly the same way. Now, with automation, everything is automatable. So all of the different parameters are all automatable, so that if you go into touch mode, then you can automatically just tweak everything and it saves with the session. It's very, very cool. Now, let's go back to here. So the iOS, quick one before we move on. 8 in, 8 out, high-end preamps, makes coffee, built-in SoundGrid DSP server, comes with headphones on the front, 1 Ethernet cable to connect it up, and it has 4 SoundGrid Ethernet ports, which means you can connect it out and expand and expand and expand. Now, do you actually need it? No. If you just want more I/O, then you could quite easily go for one of these babies, like the IOX, which gives you 12 in, 6 out, more headphones on the front, and again, just 1 Ethernet cable. So if you've got a really fast computer and you're quite happy with your plug-in processing, there's no reason that you need DSP. You just want to get one of these. So you can network with one of these as well. So if you have one of these connected and you've got SoundGrid installed behind it, you can still network share between microphones over here, microphones over there, and everybody will be happy and think you're a rock star. The IOC gives you AES, ADAT, gives you a couple more headphone knobs on the front, little tweaky knobs. And again, it's just 1 Ethernet cable. Now, if you decide after the fact that you then want to add DSP, you don't necessarily even have to add an iOS. Because we've been doing SoundGrid in live for so many years, we have these things called impact servers, which is basically a PC with our proprietary software on it that you can just connect up with an Ethernet cable, and there's your DSP processing. So you keep it really simple or as expanded as you want it to be, and we're very, very excited about it. That's the basic share. So literally 2 different workstations. Send the mics to one, send the mics to the other. All you do is route it through the back end and you're good to go. And it's always going to be under a millisecond of latency. How do we do that? I'm not sure, but we do. If we want to get really crazy, we can start expanding it out. So, send all the 12 from the IOX one place, send some of your mics and your outputs from the iOS to another place, and if you've got an IOC, send the AES and ADAT somewhere else. And again, it's all routable through that. So it's very exciting.
Okay, so my name's Dan and we're here on the DiGiGrid booth at AES. We're going to have a little look at how we integrate Pro Tools and the DiGiGrid system, talking about both native systems and the Pro Tools HD solutions that we have, the DLS and the DLI. they actually operate in terms of the integration in the same way. So we'll look at the native system and I'll explain to you where the differences might be between the HD one and the native system. So basically there are two components to this. Within Pro Tools we're going to run our Studio app plugin, and this is much more like an application in itself. It houses, a bit like multi-rack, a chain of plugins, but gives us control of some of those network functions that we need once we went to DLS or an iOS-based system. And then the other part of that is the SoundGrid Studio, and this is a controlling application that contains the controls for the network, the hardware controls, and the other bits and pieces we need to control the network. What I have here is a Mac running Pro Tools native, and then connected to it I've got some DiGiGrid processing hardware. And the way this operates is actually the same with an HD-based system and a native-based system. So let's have a look at what we have. The controlling application comes as two parts. We have a plugin, the Studio app plugin, that happens within Pro Tools. And this allows you to build your processing chain and manage within your Pro Tools, your workflow environment, all of the plugin processing. What we don't want is you to leave your native or your HD DAW and have to change the way you work. That would defeat, the purpose of what we're trying to do. So once this is set up, actually you can stay within Pro Tools. There is another application, which is the SoundGrid Studio, which allows you to manage and control some of these network functions and set up the network. So let's have a little look at that first. This is the SoundGrid Studio, and we're in the Setup tab here. And this allows me to manage my connected hardware. Actually, what we have here is a DLS connected, which appears as two parts. There's the DLI component, that's the Pro Tools interface part of it. And then over here we have essentially the server part of the SoundGrid Studio, of the DLS, and that's for the processing element. If I take here the DLI and open up the control panel, we'll just wait for this to load. This allows me to control the functions within the DLI. For example, down here on DLI port 1, I have an HD Omni connected. So here within this I can control the hardware functions of my Avid hardware. So from a user's point of view, they haven't got to worry about the lack of control within the Pro Tools environment, because our own control panel allows us to set up here. If I go to my analog out, for example, I can say the jack outputs need to follow my main output, and then we can hear it out of our system here. But these are the same controls you would get within your Pro Tools environment. And once it's set, we don't have to worry about it. We have the basic system info and the other sort of clocking components of your system. Of course, this is network based, so we need to be able to control the hardware and maybe have sync over Ethernet or have a digital sync from one of our Avid boxes. So we have a complete control panel for that. So that's the setup pad. The left-hand side here on bank A relates to hardware on the network. So these are physical interfaces, and because it's network based, actually your Pro Tools system, whether it be a native system or an HD system, can appear on the network with other Pro Tools systems, which actually means in larger environments, maybe in a post studio or broadcast environment, you don't have to worry about other connections between systems. You can have a direct live link, a bidirectional audio link across the network while still running in Pro Tools. So it's a really powerful system to be able to network your Pro Tools systems together using the SoundGrid network. This system allows you to connect up to 4 servers. The servers are dedicated per workstation, but they can all be identified on the network. And then the control section over here will allow for hardware controllers. That might be MIDI-based controllers, or in the future, actually, iPad-style, wireless tablet controllers for the SoundGrid network. And we have the basic sample rate and buffer settings that we have on our network as well. The patch tab gives me a cross-point router for my entire network. So we have the ability to take audio maybe coming in from a 192 on an HD rig and share it between multiple HD systems across our network. And again, route through either the physical devices, the drivers that appear on the network, so this is other Pro Tools systems, and then routing the outputs as well from Pro Tools systems to physical outputs in our mixer, and device-to-device routing. So really powerful, flexible cross-point router for every device on the network. And then the final section actually is a little 16-channel mixer with aux sends. We use this in the native environment to do the headphone mixes. The system automatically takes the aux outputs and sends them to the headphone outputs on the native systems. And then within the Studio App plugin in Pro Tools, we can dial in these aux sends. So we're building our monitor mixers in Pro Tools, which is actually remote controlling this entire mixer in the background. If users actually need more information, more plugins on their mixers, actually within here, we can insert Waves plugins and other third-party SoundGrid plugins directly onto the auxes. So you might build an aux mix and then actually provide the artist directly with low latency additional processing directly in this mixer. I mean, therefore the power user, it's not necessary, you don't have to do it, but at least you have the option. So that's the setup program. Once it's set, actually in your normal workflow, you don't need to come and mess with this, it's just there all the time. If we go to Pro Tools, over here on my drums, I have a Studio App plugin. So if I open this up, this is a little application all in itself. A chain of up to 8 plugins. So rather than having to use multiple inserts within Pro Tools to build a chain of processing, actually with the SoundGrid, you can build one chain of processing within a single plugin environment. So here we've got a C4, maybe some reverb and some EQ, all built into one plugin. We have various hotkeys that we can assign for individual controls. And up here we have the ability to monitor the functions of the SoundGrid server. You know, we have in the background, we have this server processing, and it will tell us the usage, how much of this server we're using at any one time. But you don't need to come here to do it. Within the Pro Tools environment, it gives us accurate indication of how much of our DSP we're using. One of the advantages for a native user we have is that a lot of users now run on laptops, and this is a great addition to a laptop system. But actually then if you go and jump on an aeroplane and you want to open your mix and play with it, you can open all of these plugins in a native environment without changing anything. So over here, this toggle function, we're currently processing these plugins using our SoundGrid server. If I toggle this to local mode, the processing stays exactly the same, but I'm now using the host processor of the computer. If you send the session to someone who doesn't have it, of course they can run it locally, or they can download this Studio App plugin free from Waves and open up in exactly the same way. So we're able to toggle the processing for a single plugin chain between the SoundGrid server externally on the network or the host computer. So and then all of the other controls, the automation and all of those other things that you'd expect to find are within your Pro Tools environment. You don't have to manage automation and automated settings externally. So that gives you a little run through of what we do on this. This interface is going to be the same for HD users. Of course, in the HD users, Pro Tools has low latency anyway, has the DSP to do monitor mixes. You don't need to worry about that. But for the native user, you do. How do we do this? Actually within here, and this is a native user function only, the monitor sends allows us to build these individual mixers for the headphone outputs. I explained that these automatically get routed to the headphone outputs within the patch bay. So actually, all we need to do is to put it into record mode, and then it automatically does a low latency mix direct to the artist's ears, and then we have the ability to adjust their individual levels for the individual artists. So all in all, it's a really complete solution. It differs from the competition because if you look at what they do, they need to go to other applications to make these mixes and to manage it. This Studio App plugin allows us to manage the entire thing in a single place. So there you have it. That's a quick rundown of what we're doing in DiGiGrid land here at AES, and I hope to see you all later in the year at Interbeat. Thanks very much.